Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Everywhere Book Fest. This is the Write Her Story panel, and we are so excited to have you here. We're going to quickly start off by having every panelist introduce themselves with their name, their latest book, and where they're dialing in from. So I'll kick it off. I'm Samira Ahmed. My latest book is Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know, and I'm coming in today from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Abigail Hing Wen. I'm the author of Loveboat, Taipei. It's my debut novel that just came out in January from HarperCollins, and I'm dialing in from Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, California.
Yay! I'm Gabby Rivera, pronouns she, her. This is my book, Juliet Takes a Breath, and I am dialing in from Oakland, Bay Area.
And I am Libba Bray, pronouns she, her. And my latest book is, let's see if I consider this, The King of Crows, fourth novel in the Diviner series. And I'm from the other coast. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York.
So I'm just going to take care of a couple quick housekeeping items. First, just a reminder that this is a live panel and we are very excited to be able to take your questions. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and start typing away and we'll hopefully be able to get to as many as possible at the end. I also wanted to introduce Jenny Kamen, who is our wonderful ASL interpreter. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here. And thanks to everyone at the Everywhere Book Fest and all of you for joining us from everywhere that you are for this panel on feminism, on stories that are hidden, and the power of telling your truth and speaking with your voice. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off. Abigail, I'm going to throw it to you first. Can you tell us a little bit about how you define feminism and who is it for?
Great. Yeah, thank you for the question and for having me on this panel. I'm really excited to be here. So feminism, I'm actually very inclusive. So I think feminism can just be defined as supporting women, supporting girls. So I have two sons and a husband, and I would say that they're feminists. And I think part of what comes with that is recognizing, what does that mean to support girls and women, is recognizing what are the unique struggles that girls and women face. And so, for example, I was actually just writing a job requisition yesterday, along with our HR diversity and inclusion representative. And she said to me, oh, you need to take out experienced as a qualifier for a lot of these roles because it's been historically difficult for women to get experience because they are just not given certain leadership roles. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad she said that, and it's true. It's very true. Like I've definitely struggled with it. My girlfriends have struggled with that. And so I think just recognizing that there are some unique challenges for women that we need to look deeper beneath what's on the surface. And then supporting women is like how do we get around those challenges to level the playing field?
Yeah, totally. That experience thing is really interesting. Gabby, what can I go to you about? How do you define feminism? I think Abigail hit on some great points, which is that it's an inclusive, everyone should be fitting under that umbrella. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Feminism. It's such a wild term. For me, I feel like I live in a world where everyone is obsessed with men and what men are doing and how men are treating the world. And I'm like so tired of that. I'm like, I would rather shift that energy and like centralize my focus and my energy on and care on, like you said, women, young girls, and femmes, doesn't matter what kind of woman or femme identified person that you are. I want to like switch that focus, why is it we can have TV shows with like 5 boys, but you can't have a show like that where like the girls are doing their own thing, where there's a whole ton of them doing stuff like solving crime or mysteries or whatever, unrelated to like the elevation of men. And so for me, it's just kind of like, we're all in this together. Essentially, I think feminism is a practice where it's like, how can we treat each other with ultimate compassion and respect and care. And because of patriarchy and marginalization of women, that work must start with like women and femme identified folks.
I love that, especially that piece of compassion and care. Lib, I'm gonna toss it to you now. How would you define feminism for yourself, or within our broader world?
Wow, first of all, those were 2 brilliant answers. And
Ditto is just going to be.
I kind of just don't want to go, yeah. I also believe in a very inclusive and intersectional feminism, to use the term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And I have thought a lot about how we get past certain barriers, because I know, Samira, I know one of the things you've talked about is institutionalized and internalized misogyny. And it's like, how do we get people to, how do we get everyone to understand the experience that we've had, and how do we understand the experiences of others? And so for me, there is a lot about trying to be able to sometimes, I think there was a time when I think I often worried about making people feel uncomfortable. And now I realize that discomfort is actually part of progress and change, and that you have to risk that even if it makes you kind of uncomfortable to do it. And so I'm willing to sometimes say, like, well, I have said to people before, are you interested in a different perspective on that? And so for me, a lot of times, I have absolutely no difficulty in, I don't get uncomfortable trying to explain. I'm happy to do that, to include people and to approach it from, okay, I understand we are all socialized a certain way. Are you interested in having a different experience? Are you interested in change? Great. Let's talk about what that might look like.
I love so many of these ideas that come up, especially this idea of discomfort. Because like Abigail, when you said, for example, even the notion or the connotation of the term experienced can exclude people. And we all here obviously believe that feminism should be intersectional and should be as giant an umbrella as possible. But also I think within those, we have to think about how like terms like that, I'm old enough that I've lived through multiple waves of feminism, I guess. And we have, I like how you're laughing, Gab. You're like, how old is she? We have of white feminism, and how, for example, women of color and femmes of color have been excluded traditionally from so many of those stories. And part of that discomfort, I mean, for me is, one, I feel like I have a particular gift for making people uncomfortable. So I'm like, hey, yeah, just got to lean into it. But I do think it's important to ask people to sort of sit with some of their discomfort, because for so long, women and young girls, et cetera, have, especially of color, have had to live and just exist in a world of discomfort. And Gabby, when you're like, this is through the male lens, I also think in some ways a lot of our books address that white feminist lens as well. Gabby, I think your book very specifically talks to that. So
wait, do we hold it up again?
Yes, please
do. Juliet Takes a Breath. Yeah, Juliet is navigating feminism, right? Because, if you think about it, a lot of kids of color especially are in school systems where they're under the rule of like white lady teachers, right? And so if you're a white lady teacher, you can be either an advocate ally, right, and boost your students, or you can kind of maybe be an accomplice to a system, that is harmful to them. And so Juliet is trying to figure out, well, I've grown up in these two different contexts, Puerto Rican mom navigating the house, and now I'm reading this book by this white lady feminist. Like, where do they come together? How do I become a woman in the middle of all of this, And so it's interesting to watch her like break it down. Even the term itself, feminism, I'm new to it. It sounds like a word that I shouldn't claim. It sounds too foreign, too white. Like Juliet is really grappling with it in ways that I had to as well. Like, is your version of equality and inclusivity the same as mine? Does it include me? I mean, even in presentation, a lot of folks will look at my presentation and want to exclude me from womanhood and conversations about feminism and stuff. So yeah, the book is like trying to figure it out, and also Juliet having her own path to claiming feminism.
Yeah. I mean, Abigail, your book also leans into that notion of discomfort a little bit, in some ways like intergenerational discomfort with a young woman trying to express herself, but it may be kind of going against what expectations are. Just like Gabby's book, and Libba's, all of our books actually speak to this idea of like going against maybe expectation. Abigail, maybe do you want to?
Sure, yeah. So I have two lead characters, Ever Wong, who secretly wants to be a dancer, but she's going to med school, and her parents have been really pushing for that for her entire life. Her father was a physician in Asia, but when he came to the United States, because of various residency requirements, he wasn't able to practice. And then there's a girl that she meets on this program in Taiwan that she attends. It's a summer program. It ends up being a crazy free-for-all, and they're, going clubbing and dancing and all this big fun stuff. But she meets her roommate who's there basically to get married. Like, she's out. It's called Loveboat for a reason. She's out to find a spouse, and over time you find out there's actually a really deep-seated reason why she is so hell-bent on finding a guy. And part of her journey is recognizing that she has so much more to bring to the table. And so what is interesting about the dynamic between the two of them in particular is Ever is really resentful of her parents for trying to shoehorn her into this life that she doesn't want. But when she realizes, like, her friend's parents have actually been just trying to get her married, she realizes, okay, my parents don't have it all right, but at least they actually have ambitions for my life beyond just being, a wife. And not that, I love being a wife is great, but so for Sophie, recognizing that it's kind of like an internal reason. I talked about the external reasons about women not having experience, but there's also internal reasons why I think women count themselves out of a lot of opportunities. And so I think that's part of what's behind her.
Well, Liv, I guess when Abigail's talking about this, sort of the internalized reasons why, women sort of don't let themselves express themselves fully, perhaps, or don't necessarily embrace all of their power, or sometimes that can be scary. That you touched on this a little bit when you're talking about institutionalized and also internalized misogyny, and your novels speak to that in like multiple different ways. I kind of consider every one of your books a feminist book, but can you speak to just specifically to how you address sort of that internalized misogyny maybe in some of your books, or institutionalized too, if you want?
Sure. We swim in it all the time in ways that are both large, like, we don't have equal pay, we don't have an ERA, and that are insidious, like, you're going to wear that, including everything that we say and do and wear is up for criticism. And we internalize that. We just swim in it all the time. I was thinking about, there was a scene when I was working on Beauty Queens, and so here it is where these young women have been marooned on an island, and instead of being destructive, they actually start to build their own society. And there's a conversation they have one night about the word sorry. And how they're always apologizing for everything. And that came about because I had been in a grocery store and this guy had rammed me with his cart. I mean, he didn't mean to, but he rammed me with his cart, and just automatically I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he said, "It's okay." What just happened?
Yeah.
The reflex, I'm sorry. It's like a modern dance, and so they have a moment where they decide that they are not going to apologize for existing. And, we do have to apologize for things sometimes, but they're not going to apologize for existing. And so I think in that way, that's one of the many things that I think about when I think about dismantling the system that we live in. And that, and that is what I think about, is what are the ways that we can dismantle the system, because it's not working.
Gabby, I see you nodding your head. So how do you, you're like, yeah. How do you think, fiction, or how the stories that you tell, how do you try to dismantle that system, or to address patriarchy within, within your stories, even within, when you are speaking to groups of young people? Why is it important for fiction to do that?
I mean, anything I do, and anything like queer people do, or marginalized folks, anything women of color do, anything Black women do, it is a disruption. It is beautiful, magical, ancestral disruption, right? Like, we are fighting against them that constantly trying to suppress oppressors. And so I feel like just the act, right? Like, just me writing a book about a queer, chubby Puerto Rican kid for for nobody but like my homegirls, my mom, my friends, like that's disruption because I'm already like, I don't need your approval. I don't want it. You know what I mean? And it's not something that I aspire to. And I think that that's the magic, right? And like, you know, with Juliet, I also got a comic called BB Free. And that's 15-year-old queer, chubby, brown girls on an adventure together. And they're the main characters. And they get to connect with Mother Nature and the universe. And so I want to just keep disrupting. I disrupt with love. I disrupt with bounciness. And I'm like, that's just the wave. Like I can't do. They got enough stories. You want stories that support patriarchy? Yo, there's a ton of stories.
Right, exactly. Look around, gesture widely to the world.
So in my little bouncy corner of the universe, I disrupt in that way with my stories where, you know, your joy and your adventure and your wholeness as a young girl is the most sacred and important thing.
God, that was beautifully said.
I like that.
That was beautiful.
I love that idea of disruption, especially how you talk about it, how you can disrupt with love too. Abigail, can you talk about that idea of disruption in your fiction and like in your, both maybe even in your creative process, perhaps?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that word. I've been working in the venture capital space in Silicon Valley, and we're always looking for disruptive leaders. So for my novel, one of the things that I actually only appreciated after it came out and people were responding to it, you know, it's a story of rebellion. It's these Asian American kids who get dropped off in a foreign country without parent supervision. They've been there, you know, it's a highly selective program, so they've been studying hard their whole lives and really following the rules. But when they go on this trip, they have the opportunity to break them, and they do, right? So there's a lot of sneaking out. There's drinking snake blood sake and taking naked glamour shots and all kinds of crazy shenanigans. And like this is based on like an actual program in Taiwan where these kids did that. And so what's been interesting for me is, you know, on my book tour, I was able to meet a lot of the alum that came out of this program. And I found there were really two interesting qualities about them. One is they were healed in terms of their cultural identity and really understanding what it means to be someone who's grown up between cultures. They were able to embrace that and bring their whole selves to the table. And the second was that they're rebellious. Like they went and they became, you know, they were able to kind of, you know, on the one hand, get it out of their system. On the other hand, find out if you rebel against the system, which I think the Asian American culture has not traditionally supported. It's very much about respecting the hierarchy. You know, there are consequences. You might get demerits. You might even get kicked out of the program, right? But it was actually a really important skill that we learned for leadership. And, you know, like going back to my point about Silicon Valley, like we are looking for people who are going to turn the industries upside down and who are willing to push back against the established ways of doing things. And so, you know, part of feminism is also pushing back against that. I mean, that's really the definition of it too. And, you know, back to your very first question, like it's pushing back against established ways of doing things, and let's rethink it and imagine like a different process, a different world, and we'll be stronger as a society for it.
You know, I think it's interesting. So just to touch on the Asian piece a little bit, because I always think, or maybe even to the broader immigrant piece, because I always think like, you know, it takes a lot of courage to be an immigrant. You know, you're making a choice, you're disrupting your life, you're moving to a whole new country, and then, at least for my experience in the Indian American community, like when we got here, I feel like all the disruption was used up in that parental generation to get here. And now they're like, everyone be a doctor because
be safe.
Yes, because that's like solid ground. We've busted our butts to, you know, get here to try to plant some roots. We've literally uprooted ourselves. And so then like when we have the, you know, because my characters all kind of rebel in certain ways against, you know, expectation, their parents, et cetera. But I almost feel like, you know, rebellion is part of like the immigrant culture, like, or the immigrant spirit maybe is a better way to describe that. And also, and where that and feminism intersect, I think you get really interesting stories. But, you know, I don't know. I do think it's part of sort of that, the grain. I think it's in the American grain. But yes, I love that way of looking at it as a disruption. I'd love to speak a little bit more to how we use, how our own, you know, sort of feminist viewpoint, not dictate so much, but like how we speak to it via our craft, like how that goes into our craft? Like, for example, Libba, do you sit down and you're like, well, I'm going to write a feminist novel today? Or how does that inform the stories you choose to write?
First of all, the idea that I would ever sit down and be organized about something is just delightful to think about. You know, for me, I'm sort of a natural born questioner, but why? But why? And, you know, so for me, a lot of it is very much asking questions and challenging myself within that, because there are all kinds of internal biases that we carry around and we don't know that we do. I think especially as, you know, especially as white people, there are a lot of things that we have to question ourselves about all the time and check ourselves and say, oh, wait a minute, this is a false inheritance. And I have to dismantle this while I'm dismantling the system. And so for me, there's a lot of challenging. There's a lot of question asking. Who profits from this? How have I been complicit in this system? How can I extricate myself from this system? What's the change going to be? So for me, that's a lot of what it is constantly challenging and really thinking about, and I do think an awful lot about patriarchy and capitalism. We are certainly in a moment right now where we are, I hope, doing the heavy thinking about how this cannot continue, this kind of economic violence, which affects women disproportionately, by the way. So yeah, for me, it's a lot about the questions.
So it's really about questioning in two ways. It's internalized questioning in ways you're confronting that for yourself, but also then putting it out into the world and questioning the world in front of us. You know, I think it's interesting because writers, if we were 100% satisfied with the world, we probably wouldn't be writers. I mean, because we were writing, you know, we all write, well, some of us write contemporary and fantasy, but a mix of different kinds of genres. But I think all of literature, whether you're writing, you know, SFF, whether you're writing contemporary, dystopia, whatever it is, we're challenging sort of the world as it exists by we're putting our stories out there. Gabby, what are some of the questions you ask yourself when you sit down and in your very organized notebook or in a very organized fashion, what are those sort of like those percolating questions that you bring to the page?
I mean, listen, I gotta be honest. My first question is like, are you having fun? Like,
that's a good question.
You know, that's my first question. Like, how is my character gonna like have a really great fun experience? Like, how can I showcase their life, right? And when it comes to, I mean, do I bring feminism into the page? It's like, well, you know, it's interesting, right? Because in my understanding of my queerness is the gift bestowed upon me by the universe so that I can manifest new futures, right? And I can create new worlds. And so in that's what I put into my writing. You know what I mean? Like this idea that I'm going to question what's happening now, right? What does it mean to be a feminist? What does it mean to explore your body? What does it mean to take that agency? I'm gonna put that in a story, and that also projects better futures. So I'm always kind of like just bringing those questions, right? And also the typical narratives don't give their women characters and femme characters like whole joy. It's compartmentalized to like mother, girlfriends, or like, you know, caretaker or something like that, you know? And so in my storytelling, I'm really trying to pull those threads apart and be like, no, what does she need? What are her loves? What is her rage? What is, you know what I mean? Like, and if I have a scene where there's a light-skinned Latina character and like maybe a Black woman character, right? Like, who's doing the labor here? You know what I mean? Like, does my woman of color have as much agency as like a white lady character, you know? So it's like bringing my real life politics into the relationships of the characters, and just trying to honor the women and femmes in my everyday life who are complicated, majestic humans, you know?
I like that idea of like how you're bringing your real life politics, how that intertwines with your narratives. Because I think one thing that's interesting about writing for young people, and I used to be a high school teacher, and I remember I had this young student, and we were talking about sort of politics, and he said this very interesting thing, which was, he's like, look, I'm 17, I'm just forming my politics. And I love the idea of what that means, to capture that idea of forming as politics. So Abigail, in your story, can you talk about, or when you speak to your stories, can you speak to how that notion of forming who you are and forming your politics as a feminist and other things, how that works its way into your books?
Forming who you are, so like from the characters, or forming myself?
Well, sort of, I guess maybe, you know what, I'm going to go back to Gabby for 1 second, because when she was saying that her own politics sort of intertwine with what is expressed on the page, I guess you could speak to either how pieces of you enter that, or how, you know, your characters are sort of forming that, and maybe that is informed by some of your experiences when you were younger. Or
right. Yeah. So I think similar to my fellow authors here, I don't sit down and have, you know, an agenda when I start writing. I think it's more about, figure out who the characters are, what is the journey that they need to go on to be transformed in a way that is most meaningful to them. And the novel is about that piece of that character's life that is the most significant in a formation of their journey. So, you know, my book is a lot about identity. That's when I boil down, like, what does an experience like going on this summer program in Taiwan mean to this Asian American girl? And, you know, my husband also had gone on the program several years before me. So we would talk a lot about, okay, let's boil it down. What is it really about? And it really was about trying to figure out, who are you as a person between cultures, but also like, what does it mean to pursue your passions while honoring your family? And all of my characters are on that kind of journey. So Ever, I mentioned, is dancer going to med school. Sophie is trying to get married, sees a bigger world for herself. And then Xavier, too, he's got his own struggles as the son of a very high-performing, high-achieving, wealthy Taiwanese family. But he's got his own dark secrets of why he's not able to keep up with the pack. And then Rick, similarly, you know, a lot of his identity has been around taking care of other people around him, and he needs to move away from that. So I think for myself, like, these are all pieces of me that I've struggled with in my life. And they get expressed through the characters, and usually like not even in ways that I know until I start to get feedback on the work. And then I'm surprised. I'm sure all of you have had similar experiences. I'm surprised by what people find in it. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even see that. That's so true. But it's all implicit. And just, I think our challenge as authors is really more just to get the story down, and then all those other things will come out of it.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when people find something about me in the book, and I'm like, I didn't write that. Did I? Oh, it's in there.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is going to go back to something Libba said. How can we dismantle the patriarchy through our fiction, Libba? 3 easy steps.
Yeah.
No pressure.
I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do this afternoon.
Yeah. Well, dismantle the patriarchy, number 1. 2.
Mop floor, dismantle patriarchy through fiction.
Yes.
Out for a walk.
Bake cookies as a treat for the end after you've done all that.
I mean, first of all, I just want to say that this has been a bit of a transformative experience being on this panel. You know, taking away things like about rebellion and about disruption with joy, and thinking about also thinking about wholeness, because I think that is definitely something that I love seeing in fiction, because I do think that we're so often made to feel that we are not enough on our own, that we are not, you know, that we don't get to have the full Roy G. Biv of our experience. And so for me, it is absolutely going back to what Gabby was saying about like those fully lived lives, like the full Roy G. Biv, just, I think, unapologetically, getting back to the sorry, letting those characters inhabit that. And also, I think, challenging, you know, I know in your latest, Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know, there are an awful lot of moments where, you know, the character is pushing back against these preconceived ideas and saying, wait a minute. And so I think allowing those debates to happen too, without necessarily demonizing anyone, just like having those debates, allowing them to happen, leaving people with questions. That's what I.
So I think we're gonna head to Q&A really quick, but I did want to ask one question, also an easy question. If you could, I referenced how I've sort of witnessed different waves of feminism, and I guess I want to think, like, let's kind of flash forward to future generations. If you could leave to the future generations of young women just a single sentence, okay, one nugget of truth about feminism, about what that means, what would that little nugget of brilliant wisdom be, Gabby?
Well, like in the Beyonce song from the Lion King soundtrack, the line is, "You'll never take my power."
Okay, I love it. I love it. Nice. Abigail, what's your nugget of truth that you like to pass along?
Yeah, I think just that the notion that everybody has unique challenges, and so try to walk in everyone's shoes with them.
Nice. I like that. Libba? You're gonna say. I feel like there's a song about to come.
I guess I would say that both, in order to have evolution, you've got to have revolution.
No. I love these like great sayings that are coming out. I think mine is just going to be to love yourself. I think that's an important one, and I feel like so often for young women, especially, there's so much pressure, and just loving yourself can be a kind of revolution.
100%.
Yeah.
So let's get. I think we're ready for questions. Okay, here we go. Here's a question from Megan. For panelists, what are some of your favorite works or processes that help you self-examine your internal beliefs? Your favorite works or processes that help you examine your internal beliefs?
I love that question.
I know, I like that too. You want to start us off, Abigail?
Yeah. Sure. I think it's actually talking to people who are different from me. I love just, I think I deliberately seek that out, people who have unique perspectives, and then we challenge each other. Yes.
I think that being open to that also means that you're sort of open to the idea of potentially being uncomfortable, right? And that speaks
wrong.
to sort of, and wrong.
Yeah.
That's actually can be a pretty brave thing to put yourself out for. I love that. Gabby, what are some of the
Oh my gosh, I feel like my whole existence is like self-examine and keep up, and like, it's Instagram too, right? I follow a lot of powerful, strong, political humans on Instagram who are always like putting forward the knowledge, and that's my politics right now, right? Media is controlled by like the patriarchy and white men, right? So their news, their stories, they want to trap us in a certain place. So no, my news comes from like my friends, my people, like people I respect, people I follow. Oh, look at that little ad.
I love the Roxanne Gay blurb. I'm not going to say it, but it's awesome. Libba, how do you sort of examine some of you spoke a lot to questioning. Maybe do you have like a little how-to on how you go about how those questions come to you? Or is it just like
kind of hard? Same. I follow a lot of people and read a lot of work that forces me to sit with a lot of things that might be uncomfortable. And I deliberately seek that out.
I think I have a lot of rage naturally as a person. I'm an Aries, so it like fits, but I sometimes try to pay attention to like what is enraging me, because there's so many things. I feel like our body sometimes gives us clues to like, hey, I'm uncomfortable right now. There's something that is bothering me. I'm getting like that thing. I don't know. I get this like, just these fist up feelings what about this situation that I'm in, or what I'm hearing, or what I'm seeing on the news is doing that? And I think usually it's like there's so many layers to that. I mean, sometimes it can be like, am I being offended, or am I finding this thing offensive, or what am I uncomfortable with in this moment? And I think sometimes delving into those feelings is a way that I can sort of examine my own self and how I bring, I'm never going to get over the rage, but like try to make some good use out of it.
I don't think that you need to get over the rage.
Yeah.
I mean, women are talked out of that all the time.
Yes, that's true. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to let it burn like a bonfire.
Rage is the fuel. There's a magazine called BITCH magazine.
Yeah.
And if you support them, you're part of the like rage, like the feminist rage of that magazine.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like rage is healthy. Rage, the earth rages, you know what I mean? So if the earth rages, then so must we.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love that. I'm going to just write that down. As the earth rages, so must I. Right now.
I love that too.
Why did these dishes get cleaned up?
Right away.
Okay, do we have another question getting queued up? This is from Samantha Singleton. In your opinion, what's one book every teacher and librarian should read other than yours?
I'm just getting ready.
I agree. Everyone should read all of your books, but can you give us a title?
I don't think I can answer this one.
I know.
There's too many.
It's always hard to think of just a single, one. But I'm going to just toss out The Grace Year. I love that book by the wonderful, brilliant Kim Liggett, and I basically begged for an arc of that book because I was hearing everyone talk about it and talking about rage. I think it really spoke so much to how the kind of gauntlet we expect young girls, young women to run through, and how wrong it is. So I'm going to toss that one out there off the top of my head. We got some others?
Yeah.
Gabby?
A book that just kind of like, oh man, like, when something eviscerates you and also evolves you at the same time, like the book Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg.
Okay.
It's just quintessential, like queer homework, like gender homework, and also a really visceral snapshot of being LGBTQ in the 50s in America. Stone Butch Blues, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Libba, you got one for us?
I've got two that come to mind.
Yes, go for two.
Between the World and Me, Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And Good and Mad, which is about women's anger, by Rebecca Traister.
Okay, I like that. I haven't read Good and Mad, but it seems like it's right up my alley. So
it's a lot to think about.
I'm gonna go for that one. Abigail, have you thought of one, or are these?
Yeah, there's so many. So I'm just gonna go with like one of my favorites.
Yeah, go
by
with
Suzanne Clark. It's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's such a long book. It's like 800 pages or something, and incredibly well written. Beautiful prose, beautiful imagery, and I think I just love it for the craft of it and the story.
I'm gonna also toss out one more since Libba did two. I'm gonna go ahead and flout this whole system. I also actually just read Red Hood by Elena K. Arnold, and that also speaks so much to the idea of how young women are forced into fighting monsters, and how our society is so filled with some of those monsters, i.e. the patriarchy and what is imposed on us. I'm sure we could list like 1,000 books. As a writer, I always feel like I'm most put on the spot when someone asks me to name a book title, and I'm all of a sudden like, have I ever read any books? But yes, those are all great ones. I'm sure if you guys think of other ones, please like tweet them out, because I'm sure as soon as we're over with this, we'll be like, oh, there were like 25 other titles I thought of.
Listen, I got one right now too.
Yes.
So, yeah. Oh, for all the teachers and all the just like soft, loving babes out there, you got to read The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janina Petrus.
Yes.
Oh my God. It is just teen romance at its best, queer Black girls, and it's just lovely. So stars in the blackness between them.
Awesome. All right, next question. We have one, I think we have time for one more question. Oops, it flashed up very quickly. I'm not a speed reader, so I didn't quite get it. Can we get that again? Does anyone else see it up there, or am I?
No, it's gone.
Okay, wait, here's from, like, how does the media affect female stereotypes, and how do you want your book to change the portrayal of women? Two great and pretty profound questions. So let's address at least the first one. How do we think the media affects female stereotypes?
So I actually have a lot of thoughts on this one.
Yes, go for it. I see you nodding. So
yeah, so I was at a panel for my reunions at Harvard last May, and there was a group of, I was not on the panel, I was listening to the panel of women leaders, and they were quoting all kinds of statistics about how few women's photos are online. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I kind of had gotten an inkling of that working in artificial intelligence, where we're finding there's bias in the algorithms because the underlying data sets being used to train the algorithms is not representative of the whole population. And so I was really struck by these numbers. Like, most photos are male, and mm-hmm. And as a result, I think it's very insidious. It's very subtle, where we think that women's stories don't matter. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because they're just not profiled. And I'm sure we've all run into that with our novels. Like, I think mm-hmm. guys should be reading girl books, but they shouldn't be called girl books anymore, right? And like, what is considered story worthy? And it's interesting to see like the same accomplishments by a guy. In some cases, if a girl is doing the same thing, it's not given equal credence, right? And I see that not just in media, but I see that in women who go out to raise money for their own companies. Like, they're held to a really high standard. Mm-hmm. So, but I think the media can be very powerful about saying, like, look, these girls are doing incredible work. It's focused in a traditionally girly space. It's actually mm-hmm. really important and impactful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that speaks to also why so many stories of and about women are hidden. Like, literally, when we look mm-hmm. at when Hidden Figures, the book and the movie came out, like literally called Hidden Figures, and all of a sudden there's all these people like, wow, there were Black mathematicians and scientists, as if like, I mean, and I just think how sad it is, like how we literally lost thousands of stories and part of mm-hmm. our culture because stories of women have been buried and considered unimportant. Yeah. Gabby, you want to talk real quick about, I think we just got a minute or two left.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's like, there's like the good media, right? Like those Nike commercials that highlight all the female athletes and like Serena Williams.
Yeah.
Like, go get your power. You know what I mean? And then you've got like the trash, good old boys media that are just like women's bodies and like, do things for boys, like that kind of stuff. And I think that there's got to be not just like wrangling in of the media, but like the reinforcement, right? Mm-hmm. So like, when I've talked to some of my friends, they're like, oh, when I was a boy, I wanted to be Wonder Woman for Halloween. But my dad or my uncles were like, no, you can't be Wonder Woman. So it's like, how come little girls are encouraged to be Batman, right? You can be Batman, but little boys aren't encouraged to be Wonder Woman because women are considered less than. Right. So it's okay for little girls to aspire to be like powerful men, but it's not okay the other way around. And so I think that there's something there, right, in the media, and then also backing up the idea that it's okay to adore and aspire to be women.
I love it. I wish I could talk to you all for like another 45 minutes, but we are down to just like the last minute. So really quickly, can you just tell us where, just real quick, where we can find you or your books or your website? Libba, tell us where we can find you.
First of all, I want to say, Samira, thank you for being an excellent moderator.
Oh, thanks. You guys made it.
Thank you.
And you can find me on Instagram, Libba Bray. You can find me at any indie bookstore, I think. I mean, not physically there right now.
Right. You're staying at home right now.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, I think. And
LibbaBray.com, is it?
LibbaBray.com. Oh, yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was like, just let me feed her that line. Gabby, what's your website? Where can we find you?
Go to GabbyRivera.com, and on Instagram, I am at Quirky Rican. And my books, you can get them everywhere, but I'm also giving extra special love to Women and Children First Bookstore in Chicago.
Yes, one of my faves. Abigail?
Yeah, thank you again for having us. So Loveboat Taipei there's a special edition actually at Barnes & Noble with deleted scenes that didn't make it into the final version, but it's in all bookstores, independent bookstores, Amazon, Target, Walmart, and Costco. And my website is abigailhingwen.com. I have a newsletter, so that's actually the best way to kind of keep up to speed on what's going on with the film and other things and the sequel that's coming out. And then I'm also on social media, Abigail Hing Wen.
Awesome. Okay, you guys, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much to everyone. Jenny, thank you. Everywhere Bookfest, thank you. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. Bye.
Bye.